All right, we are live on Las Vegas Tri Club Facebook page and we are recording. Ted, it's Friday night. How's it going?
Good. Friday night. We're getting ready, unfortunately, for a windy weekend.
Yeah.
It's gonna be some tough miles this weekend. But it is what it is.
Yeah.
At least we're not freezing, so we got that.
No, that's true.
Um,
I
I,
gotta make
you know,
sure my trailer is tied down.
yeah, you better. I mean, it's weird. It's last weekend, Saturday, Sunday, were super windy. This weekend, it's again. Last weekend, I did something a little ill-advised. On Sunday, I started riding on a Zwift ride, and I got I think it was 65 miles in. I'm like, you know what? I might as well just do 100.
Oh,
So
nice.
I did my first ever Zwift century last Sunday,
Oh,
which was that's a long way to go on a trainer. You did it. I know you've done it. It's a long way to go.
it's a long ways. Yeah. And it's a
So
lot of sweat.
it's a lot. And really, what I should have done at 65, I should have changed clothes.
Yeah, right, right.
That
I've
was
done that. That's exactly what I've done is that, yeah, because you do sweat so much.
that was a rookie mistake. But I know this sounds weird, but I was trying to do 100 miles under 4 hours.
Yeah, we're 401. Were you 401?
I end up at 401.
Oh.
It was actually 407 by the time, because I did get off a few times, went to the
Yeah.
bathroom, got some drinks.
Yeah.
Well, especially when I decided I was going from 60 to 100, I had to
Yeah.
get more drinks and food and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
And then I realized, I'm like, man, I could do this under 4 hours of moving time, and I didn't quite make it.
Yeah, right.
It was a pretty strong effort, but man, that was so now that I was like, this will probably be my last long indoor ride. And then I looked at Sunday's weather and it's like 30-mile-an-hour winds. I'm like, oh
Is
no, I
that what
gotta
it
do
is?
it again.
Well, I've taken a couple days off this week, and I think this is important for everyone to just realize is, man, work has just been crazy, and trying to keep things going, and doing some things here at the house, and I just needed to take a step back, and
You got to do it. You got
yeah,
to do it from time to time. We talked yesterday, and you're like, "What are you going to do tonight?" And I'm like, "I'm going to go swimming." I actually didn't swim last night. I have same with you. Work's been kind of challenging. I
yep,
haven't been sleeping well, and I just had to pull the plug. And it's okay.
yep, yep,
You know, it's okay to pull the plug every now and then, and just
that's right.
take a day off or
Get
days
caught
off.
up. I had a lot of things I needed to write, and to
Yep.
even though I'm when I'm biking or even running, I'm thinking a lot about what I need to write, for whatever I'm doing. But I really just needed to stop and physically sit down and write a number of things out, and it's just time. So I mean,
It's like reading a paper or reading papers. It's the same
uh,
thing. It's like I've tried it on the trainer. I
I
can't.
can't. Yeah,
I can't.
no,
I even tried it to get so I got a TV set up in front of my trainer to do Zwift. So I was
yep,
like, I could project the papers onto there.
right.
It didn't work either.
No, and it's funny. We years ago we actually did a study on watching TV while running, and to see what would happen with someone's rating of perceived exertion.
Okay.
And oddly enough, you responded one of two ways. One is people even either rated exercise easier while watching TV, and others rated it harder. So it was almost a perfect 50-50 split, one way
Really?
or the other. And really, what I think it came down to, and we didn't tease it out any further, but I think it came down to how much vertical oscillation they had and how uncomfortable
Oh
it
yeah.
would be to be watching the TV. And unfortunately, at that point, we were really just, it was exploratory. So we didn't have any really good run metrics. I didn't plan this. Okay.
Yeah.
By the
So it's
way,
funny
I
we're
didn't
talking
plan this
about.
introduction. So
Do you know? Obviously, there's been a lot of studies with music too, right?
yes, yes.
And
Yeah.
listen to music, and if you have the hyped up music, you're going to run faster. Um, so just last week, I came across a paper that was talking about why you don't want to listen to music,
Mm,
and it actually has to do with the ground reaction. Was it ground contact time or reaction force?
mm.
But basically, you would increase your risk of injury if you listen to music because you couldn't hear your footsteps.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And so the
Yeah.
louder your footsteps, the more force you're basically
Yep.
up the kinetic
Yep.
chain of your body. And So I thought that was kind of interesting too. It's like, well, maybe you could run faster,
Yeah.
but maybe you're running harder,
Yeah.
and that's not necessarily good either.
No, that's really cool. In fact, I haven't done this type of work, but it is starting to sort of catch some steam in terms of the auditory sound of the foot strike.
Yep.
And what people are doing is they're putting up sound sensors, in essence, in the lab, and then trying to classify running styles based upon that sound. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. That maybe one day we'll do that, but right
I
now,
I think it's super cool. You know, if you go to a gym and you listen to people like on a treadmill,
yeah, yeah,
you could sometimes people are just hammering
yeah.
that treadmill and they're not going that fast.
Mm-mm.
So, you know, that gets into exactly what we're going to talk to tonight about, like, you know, like the force being applied on, you know, every time you land,
Yeah.
and what that means. And so, you know, I think this does segue perfectly into tonight's talk. So tonight's talk, we're going to talk about run metrics. And I'm really excited to talk about run metrics because I know a lot of triathletes are data geeks like us, and they collect this data.
Yeah.
They may look at it like, you know, for my Garmin watch, like when I finish a run, I can see, oh, that's my ground contact time. That was my vertical oscillation. It's my left-right balance.
Yep.
And they look at it, oh, that's nice. And they don't do anything about it.
Yeah,
Or they don't, maybe, you know, at least people that I know don't really understand exactly what it is, or potentially what to do about it.
Yep.
But they're collecting the data, and if they were to go back into their, you know, into their Strava files, their Garmin files, it's there,
Mm-hmm.
but it's hard to wrap your head around.
And they're collecting the data and they may not even know it.
That's the other thing. They may not even know it. I didn't know that with the current watch that I have, if I wore a particular run strap, I got running power.
Oh yeah, that's it. I wanted to check my Garmin Connect to see if mine's doing power now.
It only will do power. You have to download the Garmin IQ thing for power.
Yeah.
And then you have to actually have it basically running while you're doing it, I think, to get the actual power data.
Yeah.
But I didn't even know that till like a month ago.
And I'll say that I'm glad they're doing it. Doing power during running, especially running outside, is still a little bit. There's sort of, you know,
there's a lot of error.
Yeah, you're sort of reading the tea leaves type of thing still, but it's. I think we'll never get there unless people start doing it and getting data, and then creating different algorithms. So
you're absolutely right. The more data that gets collected by these companies, the better it's going to get, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So we're not going to get into too much on power tonight, and running power. You know, maybe in a couple of months as I collect more data and I learn more about it, we can do more. But tonight we're going to kind of concentrate on some of the major things. We'll maybe delve into a little bit more. So let's start out maybe just talking about, we've talked about run cadence before, or step rate.
Okay.
So, you know, as a biomechanist, John, what does that mean to you? Like, how would you describe the importance of step rate or cadence?
Okay, so first we got to get some terminology down so we're all talking the same thing.
Yeah.
A stride is all the movements from the moment you have, and I'm going to use a technical term here, a discrete event on one side to the same discrete event on that same side. So often we'll say from right foot strike to right foot strike, or left foot strike to left foot strike, or interesting, we could do other discrete events. We could do toe off to toe off, things like that. But it's one side to one side. So a stride is all the movements that happen, and I'll use this as an example, from right contact to right contact. A step is right to left, left to right, right to left. And that's actually really important. And unfortunately, in the literature, there can be some confusion in how those terms are used and defined. So if you are ever reading a paper, you do need to look and see how are they defining a stride and how are they defining a step, but they are distinctly different.
Yeah. The one thing that I always do when I read a paper is I just kind of look at the numbers. And if if you're between like 160 and 190 or 200, you're talking about step. If you're down in the 60s to 90 or 100 maybe,
Yep.
then chances are you're talking about stride.
That's right. No, that's right. And you're spot on it. And sometimes you need to be able to do those mental gymnastics. I do the same thing with swimming when people talk about lengths versus laps, and you say,
Yeah.
okay, which
Yeah.
way are you?
Yeah.
Which
Or
camp are you in?
cadence in swimming, right? Is it right arm to right arm, or is it
Yeah.
right arm to left arm?
Same thing. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same thing.
Exactly.
All right. So then you mentioned cadence. So stride rate is how fast how quickly we're taking strides. And step rate is obviously steps. So left, right, right, left. And so, as you mentioned, step rate numbers are twice as high as stride rate numbers. And so again, we just need to do the mental gymnastics. That if you see 180 steps per minute, or if you see 180 hertz, or not, sorry, not hertz, I won't say that for the 180. That would be the same as 90 strides per minute.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess, the first question is that what's the practical application of knowing your step rate,
Well,
stride rate?
the basic kinematic descriptors of a running style are stride rate and stride length. That's the basic way to describe a running. Like if you have to, say, how do I describe a running style, which is really what we're interested in. You start with stride rate and stride length, step rate, step length, either way. And you start with those parameters, partly because you actually get a third parameter there, and that's velocity.
Yep.
So if you know stride rate and stride length, if you take the product of those two, if you're using the correct units, you'll get velocity. So you actually get three parameters there. And how fast you run is an interplay between stride rate and stride length.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because we talked a lot about this when we talked about the swimming, right? It's the same, it's exactly the same principle. Okay. So then back to the question, what is as far as step rate, what does somebody need to know about, why does my Garmin collect it, and what can I do about it, or what should I do about it, or should I do anything about it, or should I just collect it and like, oh, that's nice, and move on?
Man, there's a lot to unpack in that.
And I know we talked about a lot about run cadence before, so maybe just really briefly.
Okay, so let me give it good sort of big picture perspective. And we've done a lot of research on stride rate and manipulating stride rate and stride length. And so big picture, what's really cool is if I bring someone into the lab and I put them on the treadmill, or if I have them run over ground, doesn't matter. Put them on the treadmill and I say, okay, we're going to have you run. You can pick your own speed even if you want to. You're going to find a particular stride rate with no instructions from me. And I measure that stride rate. It's actually really hard to move you off of that stride rate. You find that stride rate for whatever reason. We've actually done a lot of work to try to figure out what those reasons are. All right. But what's interesting is if I do get you to run with a different stride rate, either faster or slower, that's going to influence two categories of parameters: physiology and biomechanics. Physiology, once you start either taking a faster or slower stride rate, you're going to consume more oxygen for the same running speed. Either way, it's a U-shape, what we call U-shaped phenomena. When on running though, and looking at biomechanics, the amount of force that you hit the ground with is also related to stride rate. And actually, we've shown that it's actually stride length, not stride rate. I know that's a subtle difference, but how hard you're going to hit the ground with each foot strike is dependent on how frequently you are taking a stride and how long that stride is. And in essence, the longer your stride, the more the impact. The shorter the stride, the less of impact, and therefore it's going to be related to stride rate too.
Okay, so that's awesome for running, but triathletes are special.
Yep.
Because we're going to run off the bike. And it's really interesting when we actually look at a data file off of somebody that actually just rode really hard and has already swam.
Yep.
And oftentimes your self-selected stride rate or stride step rate, and all of these factors are influenced by you getting off the bike and being fatigued when you start, or just getting into, we've all been there, right? The rhythm of running.
Yeah.
And at first, for anyone that's done, especially a long course race, the first couple of kilometers or miles, they don't feel good sometimes, right? And so one of the things that that I personally have done is I try and increase my cadence off the bike.
Yeah.
And I find that helps me personally get into basically a better run form. And then I notice that as I race, then my cadence actually will come down to more that my normal self-selected. But I also noticed the more fatigued I get, so the later into the race, the more my cadence is going to slow down. Right. So it's interesting, right? Because my self-selected cadence that I planned to race at, let's say it's 4:15 per kilometer. That's a normal kind of number for me. That's fine and good till maybe 10K and a half, right? But then it changes and it goes down to the file I'm looking at right now, 430, 432, 434. As I get more and more tired, it changes. And then if something good happens, so for example, something good, maybe you run by your family, or your friends, and like, oh, Ted, I can actually look at the file. Oh, well, that was a little bit higher cadence and a little bit faster.
Yeah.
So it's interesting when we talk about self-selected. Yeah. Because self-selected in a lab setting is, I haven't seen too much in the literature. I honestly haven't really looked too much about, 4 hours into a half Ironman. Because now it's not self-selected anymore. It might just be survival.
Yeah, that's true. Well,
Right.
so here's the point you're making is an excellent point. There's lots of things that will cause you to self-select a different stride rate. So, you go run on the grass, you will change your stride rate instantly. You go run in sand, you'll change your stride rate instantly. Run at different speeds, maybe change a little bit. There's all these different factors that you will just automatically change your stride rate.
Yeah.
And the bigger question is, why do you do that?
Yeah. Well, and can you overcome it though, right? Like, so for example, if I know my stride rate, and have it on my watch, and I can see like at K10 of a 21K run that my stride rate is decreasing. Would it be in my best interest? Because I know if I've done my proper testing, I know that at this pace is my most economical. Should I try and override that? And I don't know the answer to that.
No, and there is no specific answer to that, and that's a great question. But what I do know anecdotally is there will be athletes that will just monitor their stride rate during a race and try to stay in that narrow band so that you're not deviating too far off of it. Now, stride rate is only one part of the equation in terms of how fast you're going. Stride length is the other part. I mean, obviously you can do stride rate in place, but you're not going anywhere. So it's just one part, but neurologically, the way the brain's working, it's probably an important part to stay in a range of stride rates that you run really well at.
Yeah. Okay.
And I think this is something for Ironman. This is why I do think people need to try running at different stride rates, because you're right. Once you get fatigued or something different happens, now you are running differently at the later part of the stride or of the race, but you haven't trained that way.
Yep.
So now,
I could not agree more.
That's right. Now you're introducing a new risk to an injury or to a poor performance even at that point.
Yeah, it's I've heard the term, how many gears do you have?
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of us think about the gears to go faster. But in long distance racing, especially Ironman, you rarely train as slow as that mile 20 to mile 24.
Yeah, right.
Right.
That's right.
But you're right. You have to learn how to do that, and then maybe potentially even learn how to do it with a short stride length. Because we've all seen the Ironman shuffle.
Yeah. Right.
But do you train that, and are you ready? Are you ready for that? So I think it's a really good thing for people to understand.
So let's talk some actual data.
Okay. So so I'm going to share some data with everybody. So this is data from 70.3 Augusta, and this is me. And I actually did not spend much time looking at it till today. And so I wanted to share it with everybody. But I remember this race really, really well. This was my last race that I've done before COVID where I didn't fall off my bike.
Mm.
So it was my last really good run data that I had. So I'm going to share.
Sorry, guys, I'm behind. Okay.
And I'm going to share. There's as I pull up the screen, there's going to be several other pieces of data here, but we'll look at stride. We'll look at stride rate to start with, or step rate. So here is my entire 70.3 run. And we're looking at the top one here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is step rate throughout the hour and what was it, an hour and 30 something minutes.
Okay.
And you can see when I got off the bike, I purposely, like I told you, tried to have a high stride rate.
Yep.
And if you think about it, realistically, I actually stayed pretty consistent throughout. So I'm starting at, I'm like at 196.
Uh-huh.
You know, I dropped all the way down. My lowest was 186.
Yeah.
The fun thing is that I finished really hard.
Yeah.
Right. Which is really interesting that you can do it.
Yeah, no, that's a great observation. And that's what's interesting is that you do tend to stay in a pretty narrow band of stride rates. And I'll tell you that when we do our work and we try to get people to run with plus or minus 10% faster or slower stride rate, it's really hard. But we believe that you probably have a wiggle room of about plus or minus 5%. That's probably not negatively influencing your running physiology.
Well, let's look at a half hour here. So
Okay.
let's look at a half hour. So from 30 minutes to 1 hour. And now I can actually get, like, I'm 188 in that half hour.
Okay, where's the 188?
So top left, if I take my cursor away, but it was over here.
Okay.
So,
there. Okay, got it. Okay.
So I'm 188 for that selection.
Yep.
And then if I look at maybe, let's say 45 minutes to the next, like another half hour block here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 189.
189. Yeah, that's pretty common.
So I'm really not, even at the end here, where I was struggling until the very, very end, and I'm still 189.
Yeah.
So there's not a tremendous amount of variability, especially when I'm into the race.
Right.
Like off of the bike, that first 10 minutes, I'm 194.
Yeah.
But like I told you, like, and then the truth of the matter is, like, I mentally think about having that, but it's also it's also, I can only keep that concentration for so long.
Yeah, right.
And then the other thing that, if we just look on the right hand side here, we can actually see these are half kilometer splits, and I was running well. Like I'm 4:15 per K, in the beginning, but then I got too hot. So, anyways, and I obviously started slowing down. So that's stride or step rate. And sorry, it got a little bit bigger there. This is just that selection we had. I can actually deselect it. So that's the entire race. So that's it. Really, I do think that kind of bears out into the research. Now, it would be interesting to see this on, and I don't have the data handy of a full Ironman.
Yeah.
And what ends up happening. But
let me just jump in on the research part, because I just quickly did the calculation. So if 188 is your stride rate, 5% faster is 197. Okay.
Yeah. And so definitely I'm within that range. So 197 is my top.
In the research out there that starts to talk about how VO2 starts to increase with increases in stride rate, they're talking 10, maybe 15, maybe even 20% increases.
Once you get out of that range.
Yeah. Now, the point of that is that's huge. Yeah. That would be like going from 188, 10% more would be going to over 200 strides per minute. And this is why we've got to be careful when we read that literature. Yeah. What's really happening in the real world versus what are we seeing in the lab? We're looking at a 20, step rate swing for you. You're not doing that in a real run.
Yeah. But I also, I've looked at some other files, just online today and looked at one of the things you can actually see is when somebody is, I don't answer more or less fit, the less fit person tends to decrease more their stride rate over time, like over a 70.3 or over an Ironman. And it might be because they start to walk. I don't know. Because obviously that would have a huge influence on it. Okay, that's enough on, I think, on stride rate. Let's talk about ground contact time.
Okay.
Because that happens to be the next one that's up here. So John, give us the biomechanics crash course on ground contact time and what it is.
It's how long the foot is in contact with the ground. So biomechanics, we're sometimes a little lazy. So that's all it is just how long the foot is in contact with the ground. So the moment it strikes the ground, which is with some part of your foot, maybe it's your heel, maybe it's the outer part of your foot, maybe it's your forefoot, depending on your running style, and then the ground contact time all the way up until when the foot leaves the ground. And that's pretty common to see ground contact time to decrease as your step rate increases.
So my question for you, because as I was reading in more depth about this this week, because I knew we were going to talk about this, and there's a controversy here.
Yeah,
okay?
there is.
Is when your foot's on the ground, are you moving?
Oh, so wait.
When your foot's on the ground,
yeah.
Obviously the foot is not moving.
Right.
But so this is the thing is like, so some people were basically saying when your foot is on the ground, so this ground contact time equals time you're not moving.
Yeah. So no. So
I agree with you, but,
yeah.
But there was some.
So your foot's not moving, yes. But the thing that people don't realize is with each time your foot is in contact with the ground, you are slowing down and then speeding up. Every foot strike. You are not running a constant velocity. You never run constant velocity. Well, it'd be constant velocity if you're in the air, okay? But you got to land at some point. Every time that foot strikes the ground, you slow down a bit, you speed up a bit. Every time.
Yeah.
Well, so, when we're doing endurance run, now let's take out sprint starts or slowing down at the end. When you're trying to run a consistent pace, every foot strike, you are slowing down and speeding up.
And so basically the article I was reading about that was having this controversy, was talking about, basically was trying to convince people that one of the things they would want to do to become a more efficient runner and a faster runner would be to reduce their ground contact time. And I think that was still the takeaway message, is that, all things being equal, if you could reduce your ground contact time, that would be more efficient. Would you agree with that?
Sure, because if you're not touching the ground, you're not generating any force, and if you're not generating any force, you don't need to do any conversion of carbohydrates to energy. So yes, that's the thing. If you're in the air, that's free because you're not pushing on the ground anymore.
And the ground's not pushing on you, so you're not decelerating.
That's right.
You're not accelerating. You're just having constant motion.
And there is some work on looking at flight time, and flight time would be how long you're in the air where neither foot is in contact with the ground.
I have that chart too.
Oh, good. Yeah, so, and that is not metabolically costly. This is why, going back to power, we started on that. This is partly why getting power during running is actually a little tricky, because there's a period of time where you're not pushing on the ground at all.
So I actually have another file here. I have ground contact time I can show us with pace. I think that would actually, now that we've said this, I think it might be a good one to look at.
Yeah, and ground contact time will tend to decrease as you run faster. So, someone like a Carl Lewis running 100-meter sprint, his ground contact time is really, really short, because he's trying to get that foot on contact with the ground and get it off for the next contact.
So this is ground contact time with pace.
And the purple is pace?
Yep, purple is pace.
Yeah, so you slow down, your ground contact time goes up. You speed up, your ground contact time goes down. So that's pretty characteristic. You got more granular detail on the ground contact time, but.
And you can actually see, even like on this here, right, where I actually do speed up a little bit here, and you can see the ground contact time goes down. It's very easy to see when you start to really look at it. And then even like when I finish, right, and I do this final, my final kick in the last 2 minutes.
Yep. Yep.
It's very, I mean, it's very simple to see.
Yep.
So, one of the things that, that I think is important is like, what can somebody do to decrease their ground contact time in the real world? So we can look at it, but what do we do to decrease ground contact time? Any ideas?
Well, this is where coach comes into play, and this is where you do, running style does come into play. But I'm not a coach.
So the literature says one of the best things you can do is run hills.
Is do what?
Run hills, sprint hills.
Yeah.
Hill sprinting. Mm-hmm. And the second thing to do is basically increase your stiffness in your lower leg. And by increasing stiffness, we're talking about increasing the stiffness of the tendons and the neurotendinous junctions musculotendinous junctions. And so this is where we get into the plyometric side of things.
Yeah.
So single leg hopping, basic plyometric little jumps. One of the first things that when I was starting to work on mine was just doing jump rope. Mm-hmm. And so that's a piece. And then sprinting and actually doing things where you're actually putting a lot of contact down and trying to get off of the ground quickly.
Yeah. So, and your spot, and this even goes back to what we were talking about with the sound of the foot.
Yeah.
When you're running faster, your lower extremity is stiffer. And a characteristic of that, easy way to look at stiffer running or think about it is how much your knee is bending. If your knee's bending a lot, then you're not stiff. Yep. So you're doing very little knee flexion while you're running. And so I always think of it as, when I'm running, I'm actually hitting the ground really hard.
Yeah. I've got actually another chart that's basically how hard I hit the ground. Mm-hmm. In newtons, and you can actually do it in like just divided by your body weight as well.
Oh, cool. But, you got that in from your device?
Yes.
Oh, I want to see that.
Okay, I will pull that one up. Non-metrics, I think it's in this one here.
Because we've done a lot of work in our lab on using accelerometers attached to the leg or the shoe, or we've actually put them on the head too.
So here is my force in G's.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to let you slide with that, but
there's also force in newtons.
Forces in newtons.
Well, here's force in newtons.
Yeah.
So that's, but you can see, the charts look almost identical.
Yeah. And see, this is where sometimes as a biomechanist, it's like, fingers on the chalkboard when they have F max G. What they probably really mean in the plot below that red one is we typically take your ground reaction force and divide it by your body weight.
That's exactly.
We talk about times your body weight or 2.2 times your body. And that way you and I can talk relative terms. That's probably what they mean by the next.
That is exactly what it is. Okay. That is times your body weight.
Yeah.
And so you can get yes.
But to call it G's, I don't like that because that's not right.
but this is the force. And I can get this very granular if I want.
Okay.
I smoothed it to make it look a little bit nicer, but I think it's pretty interesting as well. Like throughout the course of a race, how much force I'm hitting the ground with at any given time. And I could obviously plot this with speed as well, but I just broke it down like this. And then flight time is also here. So you were talking about flight time. Mm-hmm. And you could see like when I'm running, more efficiently, I felt like this was probably the most efficient part of my run.
Yeah.
My flight time is greater, right? So I'm averaging in this area 104 milliseconds.
Right.
And down here where I'm struggling, 89 milliseconds.
Yeah. And so the line above that is duty factor.
Yep.
And that's almost the inverse of that. It's not, but conceptually it is, because what the duty factor represents is how much your foot is in contact with the ground. And so when your flight time goes down, that means that one of your feet is probably in contact with the ground more.
Yep. Yeah, and that's another thing you can supposedly train by increasing stiffness, and by doing plyometrics, you can actually make changes to these things. So yeah, it's pretty amazing, all this data, huh?
That is really amazing.
Off of this chest strap and a watch.
Ah, that is really, really neat.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So let's talk about the other basic, simple ones, and that is vertical oscillation. And that's one that, you know, a lot of people see on their watch. Where's my vertical oscillation? We got flight time.
Yeah, that's a fun. I've got a funny story about vertical oscillation too. And actually, that goes back to the RPE study that I talked about, in terms of, I think, the people who did not like watching TV.
Yes, we're the ones that had more vertical oscillation.
Yeah, that's
So
right. Like go back and tease out.
So my bottom chart is vertical oscillation. So what is vertical oscillation?
So it's how much and the way that we define it in the lab is how much your center mass goes up or down during a running stride. And we've done a lot of work on this. I said we put accelerometers. We'll put them right on the forehead. So it's just a little accelerometer about the size of an eraser. We'll stick it on the forehead. We actually won't stick it on. We wear a hat band, and we put the accelerometer on that hat band. And what we've noticed in all the different research we've done is you keep the head sort of in a real narrow band of accelerations, which ultimately will translate back to vertical oscillations. And as part of it is you're trying to maintain a stable visual field is what we think. So,
in my understanding with some of these high-end chest straps, that these are vertical oscillations, one of the best measurements they have, because it's on the chest.
Yeah.
Right. And
that's good. Yeah.
The chest, a really good spot for it to be.
Yeah.
And they have accelerometers in them, and so they can actually measure it pretty accurately, from my understanding.
Yep, and it has to be tight. That's the other thing. So if your chest strap is not tight and it's flopping around, that will negatively influence the data. But we put it up on the head because there's no soft tissue up here for the most part.
Yeah. And your sternum is a pretty good spot, really.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard. Okay, so then what would we expect to see? For just an average, like not even saying just in a race, like what kind of numbers are we looking at here?
Yeah, well, these numbers that you have here, I'm only seeing the high end, 8.8. I can scroll down a little bit. Yeah, those are very characteristic numbers.
I can't scroll down any further, unfortunately.
No, you're good. You're good. No, you were good.
Oh, is that better? You see? Yep. Can you see?
Yeah, just go to your left. I think it's probably okay on the screen. It's just on mine that
I can't move it to the left.
Oh, okay.
I can make my screen smaller. Is that better?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, I mean 7, 8. Those are centimeters. So 7, 8, 7 meters is
So if we look at maybe my first half hour.
Yep.
I'm 8.3 centimeters.
Mm-hmm.
And then let's say when I'm struggling, 8.7.
Yeah, that's you're going up and down. And so the downside of going up and down is you're not going forward as much.
Yeah.
And so you don't necessarily want a lot of up and down. You want, and if you look at people running, if you look at any sprint racers, there's a lot of good video on like Instagram on people sprinting, and the cameras go right alongside them. You look at their head is really very not moving up and down much at all, because they're trying to propel themselves forward as fast as possible. They don't want to go up or down.
Yeah.
And so we're the same way. When we start getting tired, we'll probably start to see more vertical oscillation.
Which is really interesting, right? Because you're using more energy when you have less.
That's right. Well, and that's a great point. We've seen this a lot in our fatigue studies, where sometimes what people do is they're adopting a strategy that's more costly than when they weren't fatigued. And that's the sort of paradox that we see a lot in research, and no one's been able to really put their thumb on exactly what's going on. So,
well, but you see the same in biking, right? Yeah. When somebody's fresh, they're nice and stable. They get, they try and push a little harder and start moving their head and moving their body around. They're using more energy.
Yeah.
But it just happens. And You can focus on it for a little bit of time. And it's the same with this. Like, I know, like, for when I'm running, and I'm better at it when I'm running just a pure running race.
Yep.
It's actually something I kind of focus on a little from
Mm-hmm.
time to time. Is like, if I start bouncing a little bit too much, I'm like, okay, let's really focus. For me, I look at the horizon. I'm like, okay,
Right.
focus on the horizon. Try not to have so much bounce, because that's wasted energy.
No, totally. You're spot on. And what's interesting is your vertical oscillation will change as you start changing different running surfaces. So if you run on grass again,
Yep.
you probably change your vertical oscillation. If you run in sand, if you run on a really soft surface, your vertical oscillation will change. Running on trails probably that way. What's interesting is we actually did a study with running, looking at this. Well, actually, we didn't look at vertical oscillation. This is what we need to go back and do. But running on the treadmill versus running over ground to run faster, ultimately running on the treadmill, what they were probably doing to run faster is just jumping up higher to let the treadmill move underneath them, which would translate into running faster, versus running over ground. You have to propel yourself forward. So running on the treadmill and running over ground, there are differences in those techniques. You can take advantage of that because one of the training for an Ironman that I think is really good is to do all these different running, what we would call perturbations: run on grass, run in dirt, run on a treadmill, run on a track that's softer, run on the road. And every time you run, you're going to run a little bit differently, and your brain starts to understand and compute that style. And then, you're prepped for when you're really tired at the end of an Ironman. Hopefully you're not entering a new technique that you've never used before.
So one of the things with vertical oscillation, I used to have a lot larger vertical oscillation.
Mm.
When I started looking at this 4 or 5 years ago, or longer maybe, I had a 10 centimeter just on like an average training run. And
Yeah.
I really, I focused on it. I had it, it was one of the metrics on my watch.
Mm-hmm.
And I would look at it constantly, like, okay, like that's too high. Because I had average vertical oscillation. And I was trying, like, in the run, like, oh man, it's at 9.1. Okay, I gotta really focus on it. And like the next K, I'd look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm down to 9. That's good. Like, I'm making progress. I'm going the right direction. And but it was just the feedback for me, like, of having something that was, giving me that feedback. And I think that that's something, once again, that uh, the triathletes are collecting this data,
Mm-hmm.
and you could become a better runner by,
Yeah.
you know, just a couple things here, decrease your vertical oscillation, decrease your ground contact time. You're gonna be a better runner.
Yep. And this is so cool. And I'd be interested in, when you look at those data, 10 centimeter vertical oscillation, I'd be curious as how fast you're running, or if
Mhm.
that's 10 for the same running speed as what you're running now. That'd be interesting to
It,
see if you're
it's
running
funny, 'cause
fast.
I was about as fast,
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
but
Interesting. So,
now I'm more efficient.
yeah, no, totally. Well, now remember, you can run in a way where you have very little vertical oscillation.
Yeah, and that's not efficient either.
That's right. And that's just when we say optimal running style, it's not extreme on one end,
Yeah,
which is minimum vertical oscillation, and it's not extreme on the other end, maximal vertical oscillation. There's something in the middle,
yeah,
and that's what optimization is all about, is trying to figure out what the
yeah.
middle is. But you'll never figure it out unless you try these other extremes. And so this is
No,
why it's good to naturally try it by running on a variety of different surfaces.
and really, you could look at this if you really wanted to get into it. You could look at, like, vertical oscillation and heart rate, right? So
Hmm.
so you could actually see if this is more efficient or less efficient for
Yeah,
you.
yeah,
At any, obviously, if everything else was equal, right?
yeah.
That's the problem with heart rate. It's hard to basically, yeah, get everything the same. But we talked about that before with shoes and
Yeah.
choosing shoes and yeah. But I do think that once again, these are valuable things that a lot of people have access to, and they don't recognize that they can see it and what it means.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But it is, and I really like the point you're making, is that you've got to look at it, one, understand it, but then also start figuring out those actionable things that you can do.
Yeah.
And one thing that I always think is good is just to try running differently and see, let your brain sort of figure out these alternative styles for running.
Show you this one.
Okay.
So this is flight time versus speed.
Okay.
And the speed is in meters per second as well.
Yep.
So it is pretty interesting, right? Like as I slow down,
Mm-hmm.
my flight time definitely, I mean, you can see the points, in here, I'm slowing down. My flight time actually is increasing.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I'm going the fastest, my flight time's the highest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
So flight time,
that's
99
good
milliseconds.
because you're not pushing
3.8.
on the ground. So
Exactly. And then as I become more fatigued in here,
yeah.
flight time 92 milliseconds, speed 3.5 meters per second.
Well, and so this is actually interesting. A lot of times in the research world, we define running as a gait pattern where you have a period where neither foot is in contact with the ground, which would be flight time.
Right.
But in reality, if you go and watch, especially the end of an Ironman, people will be running, but one foot will always be in contact with the
So
ground.
there's no flight time.
That's right. There's no flight time. You actually have a period of double support, but we would still say that they're running. So we actually define running a little bit differently at that point. We say the center of mass is at the lowest point of mid stance, whereas walking, your center of mass is at the highest point. And so that's a little more broader way to describe running.
So we've tackled a lot of stuff.
Oh, K-leg. Wow, it's got stiffness on. Oh my goodness.
You want to? Yeah.
This is amazing. All right, so the K numbers.
Yep.
That represents your stiffness that you're talking about.
Yep.
And there's actually a couple different ways to do stiffness calculations, and they've got two here: K-leg and K-vert, which are really common ways to do it. K-leg is taking into consideration the angle, the foot and leg. Well, sorry, the leg is referring to the whole lower extremity. Okay, not just one segment. So it's really from the hip down to the foot.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. It's more like when you look at K-leg, it's stiffness, but it's also springiness.
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, it is. But in reality, the lower extremity is not a spring.
Right.
Because you can flex your knee, it doesn't mean that you're going to rebound. But
there is some spring component to it.
That's right. You can predict running based upon this mass spring idea or a bouncing ball type of idea. So yep. K-leg is sort of the way that you're looking at your lower extremity, the way it hits at the angle, and then you go through a stride and then you take off and your leg is at a different angle. It's accounting for that change in the orientation of the lower extremity. K-vert is just looking at what's happening in vertical. It's just thinking you're a bouncing ball. That's all it's thinking for that model.
And it's the unit K per Newton meter.
Yep, that's newtons per meter. Yeah.
Per meter.
So if you had to calculate the stiffness of a spring, you do that using the equation. The force a spring will exert on you is equal to negative kx, where k is what you're looking at here. That x is how much you stretch or compress the spring. Either way, it doesn't matter. So if I stretch a spring, it wants to pull back to the center, and it pulls back to the center with the force based upon how much I stretched it and how stiff the spring is. So if you've got a really stiff spring, it takes a lot to stretch it. It's going to generate a lot of force to go back.
Well, then would you expect to see what we're seeing here? So like as I'm running faster and I'm fresher, I've got more stiffness and more spring.
Yep, that's right.
And then as I get more tired, I lose it.
Yep. So what we say is like your K-leg going up, we're saying you're stiffer.
Yep.
Now the ramifications of that, or the interpretation of that is that you're getting more elastic return during running. That's the idea.
Yeah.
Now you can have that's the
and once again, we can train these things, right?
That's right. And you're spot on. This is the plyometrics. This is why you want to do plyometrics, is to train that elastic behavior of the lower extremity.
Yeah, it's pretty unbelievable. I got all this from a Garmin
That is,
app
yeah, that's some good math
and
right there.
and some good math
Yeah.
for this WKO that I'm still just scratching the surface on how to use. But
Is that, can you give a little teaser here and look at the power? I'm just curious as what it looks like.
I don't have power because I didn't know about it back
Oh,
then.
okay, okay.
But I can show you the power data from the race, the duathlon race,
Oh, okay.
if you'd like.
Well, and I have not looked at wearable tech running power, so this is my first exposure right here. So,
Okay, so that was should come up here. Oh, I know why.
now, as you bring that up, I'll just say, conceptually, I think it's really important to realize power represents how fast we're transforming energy from one state to another. There's a lot of math behind it. There's a lot of mechanics, but it's how fast we're transforming energy from one form to another. And what we're looking at power and human performance is we're talking about how fast we're taking chemical energy or food, glucose, fats, and how fast we're transforming that energy to mechanical energy or movement. That's what power is. Just like a power of a white light bulb. It's how fast we're transforming electrical energy to light energy or a heater. And we talk about those devices in terms of power.
I gotta stop sharing. I think I don't know what I'm doing, so I gotta.
Oh, okay.
I'll restart it and see if I can get it. I get so deep into WKO, I can't remember how to get back out.
Yeah, right. No, that's great. Well, and power, it's interesting because in running, you'll have periods where you have positive power and negative power. Whereas in cycling, we're always talking positive power.
Oh, okay.
We can do that. We can spend more time on that on another call, because then when we start talking negative power.
I can quickly show you the power data. I found it.
Oh, okay.
All right. So
I'm curious as to what it looks like, because again, you're going to have a period of negative power where you're actually absorbing energy, and then you're going to return that energy. That's the idea.
All right. So this was the duathlon.
Okay.
Power is there.
Power. Okay, which axis? Okay, it's the one all the way over on the left. Oh, and it is all positive. Interesting. Okay, well, I'm gonna have to look and see how they're doing that algorithm then.
So this is interesting too, right? Because for those of you that know the course, the first 10 minutes is uphill and it is tough.
Yeah.
And the second half is all downhill.
Yeah.
And so I'm definitely putting out less power going downhill, but
Right.
ultimately going faster.
But see, and that's what's interesting. That's what I gotta look and see how they're doing this, because that's where you're going to do a lot of your muscle damage running downhill, because you're doing a lot of eccentric contractions, which would in essence be negative power. So
I'll find a few of these things to make it a little easier to see.
yeah, what they may be doing is just taking the absolute value of all power and putting that down here. So
this was running effectiveness. This is a good one. Okay, so power is in yellow, speed is in blue, and then running effectiveness, as far as kilograms per Newton, is another thing that they're getting into is it's how much power per kilogram you weigh. Yep. And you can basically determine how effective your running is. But it's tricky because now, and there's a way to do it. You can actually correct for the elevation, because you can actually see, I'm at 1,050 meters here. I'm going up and then coming back down.
Yeah, and that's the trick with power, is to account for the elevation, the grade changes.
Yeah, but that's the whole idea of using it too, right? Is you may not recognize when you're on a 1% or 2%.
Oh, hit. Totally. No, no, that's so true.
And you could look at your watch and be like, okay, I know that, let's just take this average in here. I'm 5.11 watts per kilogram in that point. And I could see that on my watch if I put that in. And, then I know that, in this area where I'm downhill, I'm 5.4 watts per kilogram. in here I'm 5.9. And and the idea is, it's kind of the power meter on the bike is to level it out. And there's a lot of research on this, especially running into a headwind.
Mm-hmm.
Is can you maintain the same power
Yeah.
into a headwind? And because psychologically it's really hard to do it.
Yeah.
And some people actually will put more power in, and
Mm-hmm.
they'll actually cause themselves fatigue that they don't recognize they're causing themselves, because they're looking at their pace.
Yep.
Like, oh man, I'm running a marathon, and this mile I gotta do I don't know, 6-minute mile, but they're running into a 10 mile an hour headwind.
Yep.
And next thing you know, that they're putting out more effort than they have in their plan.
Yep.
And it can mess with you. But when you look at just pure power data, you might go slower during that point, but hopefully it's a looped course, right? And you're going to come around, you're going to get a tailwind at some point,
Mm-hmm.
keep the same power, and then you should have the same metabolic costs. But running power, once again, it's in its infancy. And honestly,
Yeah.
the system I'm using with just a watch and a heart rate and the Garmin heart rate strap is not the best, as far as what I've seen in the research. Outside Magazine had a piece on this where basically, I think it was, and I don't want to quote the wrong number, but it was like there was 10% variability.
Okay.
And then the Stride power meter is like 5%.
Okay.
But this was way cheaper. I happen to have it.
Well, I think it's great you're exploring it. It's really cool. And yeah, no, I think this, to your point of just looking at run metrics, one, it's just good to look at them and see how you're running to see if you can pick up any patterns, but then two, to see if you can change the way you run to influence some of the metrics, and then discover what running style starts to work and help you run faster,
Yeah.
or more effectively.
And I think the last thing I'll leave with is, you don't have to have WKO software to do this. There's free software on the internet. I was looking at a few other possible ways you could get this data. Garmin Connect, if you're on Garmin, you can get most of this data if you really know what you're doing on it. So there are definitely ways to get the data. I just happen to be learning with WKO5, and it is what it is. It's actually way better for cycling than it is for running, but I'm still getting a lot of data.
Yeah. Oh, it's pretty awesome.
Yep.
That's great. I don't know how you walk away from your computer. You're just diving in. This is one, you're one
This
run,
is one.
so much you
This
can
is
do.
one 20-minute. This is one 20-minute run.
Yeah, right.
And look at all this data I have.
Yeah, it's
Like,
really, I love it.
like and I built a lot of these charts.
Yeah, yeah.
Because based off of what I wanted to see.
Yep.
And yeah, you're right. Like sometimes I look up and I'm like, man, I've been at this for like 2 hours and I'm analyzing 10 minutes of running.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's wonderful.
I have not built enough into the running to truly get like a power duration curve that is right yet. So to build a good power duration curve, you need to have a lot of data. Like my cycling power duration curves are really tight. Like, and based off of that, you can get a lot of good data. But the running one, I still got to get out and do some sprints and get some better data. But
that's right. Then you get data under a lot of different situations, and then you start to put that story together in terms of what those data mean for you. So I think I love what you're doing.
Well, thanks. It's well, honestly, it's been a crash course in a lot of stuff, but
yeah.
it's, I don't know. This is my hobby, right? This is what
Yeah.
well, and it's a hobby, but it also obviously ties into what we're doing at work.
Yep.
And I just love the fact that we're doing this stuff outside now, right? Like, John, when you were in school doing your PhD, this was not stuff you could collect outside.
No, not at all. I mean, we had a heart rate monitor. That was the extent of being able to record something out of the lab. And it was such a cool thing to get, a polar heart rate monitor. It was a pretty big deal. I mean, I don't remember how much they were off the top of my head, but I mean, it was hundreds of dollars to get a polar heart rate monitor. And now it's, we don't blink an eye at it. It's common.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but
For
yeah,
sure.
you're diving into WKO, and I'm working on my trailer, and my trailer is coming along. I may get the walls, the outside, the skins. I may get them up, or at least one this weekend. That's my goal.
Does it depend on the wind?
It's a little bit of the win. It's also how badly I messed up. So all those little decisions are
Yes.
starting to add up, and yeah, I know I've got some.
Are you having decision fatigue?
Oh my gosh! Well, no, paralysis by analysis has
Yeah.
been my motto. So yeah, it's been. You do have to, analyze, but then at some point you got to make a decision and then suffer the
And
consequences
suffer
one
the
way or the other.
consequences. But isn't that everything we do in life?
Oh, totally. I just hope that what I've been doing is all that analysis leads me to either make smaller mistakes or mistakes that I'll make fewer of them as I go along. So
I still contend that you are going to, when we get back to racing, you are going to have the best season you've had in
yeah,
years because you've taken this time, like this mental break away
yeah,
from a triathlon, and you haven't been like killing yourself training. But you're still training, but you're not doing the crazy hours.
no,
And I actually think this is going to end up being a really good year
no, I hope so, but
for
I
you
don't know. We'll see.
because of the
Yeah.
trailer.
Yeah, that's right. I'll be able to take my trailer to the races. But yeah, no, I've been trying to stay right around 10 to 15 hours, somewhere in that window.
Yep.
Just trying to be consistent. Uh, we'll see.
All
What do you
right.
got this weekend?
Well, as long as Swift ride on, it looks like
Yeah.
on Sunday, swimming two runs tomorrow.
Okay.
I did it last week. I run to the pool, swim, go for coffee, run home.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's nice to split it up. You've done a
Yeah.
lot of the double run stuff.
Yeah, I like
It's
that.
nice to split up because I'm starting my build for St. George. I
Yeah.
started it last week. It was my first week of building. This is my second week. So I got one more week of build and then a drop back week. But it's yeah,
Good.
it is what it is. I'm actually trying to use more metrics in my training, but
Mm,
it's becoming a little bit more of a challenge when you start to use more of the metrics and be like, okay, I have to have a TSS score of
yeah.
960 this week. It's where I need to be. And it's a little bit daunting because a lot of times several years ago I just kind of went off feel,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to be more regimented, so we'll see. It probably won't make a
Good.
difference.
That's good.
Well, the reason honestly, the reason I try to go more regimented is I'm really doing my very, very best to prevent injury.
Yeah.
And I know that if I stick to the plan and I don't have any big spikes, I'm not going to get, knock on wood, I'm not going to get injured.
Yeah.
And, I've had injuries derail a couple seasons, and I can't, I don't want to deal with that again.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. Well, that's your best chance for success is getting that start line injury free.
Exactly. But other than that, not a whole lot going on. I mean, I'm vaccinated, but Marie's not, so we can't do anything.
Yeah, right.
I'd love to. I would love to get on a plane and go to Canada, but can't do that.
Yeah. I miss traveling and racing, but we'll get there. It'll happen.
I actually was looking at Challenge Miami.
Oh yeah, nice.
And well, it's 2 weeks from now, and I'm like, I could still sign up. I can get on a plane. I'm vaccinated.
Yeah, right.
I could go do it, and then I'm like, that's a pretty big commitment for to do. I'm really honestly, my fingers are crossed that St. George will happen.
Yep.
They've been doing events, and
Mm-hmm.
they did the duathlon there a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully that'll happen.
Yep. Hopefully that's a good sign. So.
But but also in my mind today, I was out riding. I was like, I just hope if they cancel early. And the second they cancel, I'm taking 2 weeks off.
Mm-hmm.
It's been COVID's been hard for us, and just for training too. Like, because you keep thinking, well, maybe this event will happen. Mm-hmm. Like all last year, you went through that. Yep. You're training through thinking, well, maybe this will happen. Maybe this will happen. And I kind of feel like I've been in a perpetual maybe this will happen.
Uncertainty.
Yeah, and uncertainty. So,
Yeah.
but it is what it is.
Yep, we'll get there.
So what do you got going on this weekend other than trailer stuff?
Triathlon.
You got anything fun going on this weekend?
No, just the trailer. Trying to get that. I'll go for my normal swim bike run. I'm still testing out those swim force devices. So
Yeah. John, we've got to see. I got to look at that and see if there's an upload into WKO, because
yeah.
there is an actual swim power metric here.
Okay.
So we gotta. I'll do a little bit of reading on that and see if we.
Yeah, and look and see, because the Vasa trainer is probably more common. See if that.
Oh, I'm pretty sure that would be, and I wonder if we can get some of the similar data.
Yeah, that would be cool. The Vasa, you have to create a special activity on your watch, and it actually records it as a bike activity. So it would be interesting to see it.
Yeah, you probably could get a lot of this data then.
Yeah. So I wonder if WKO just can read those in, and let's look at that.
Yeah, that'd be fun. Awesome.
All right, good talking. I gotta go have dinner. I haven't eaten yet.
Well, I got something in the oven right now, so I'm the same. Okay, have a great weekend.
You too. Bye.
Okay, bye.